The envelope slipped from Elena Vasquez's trembling fingers, its contents spilling across the concrete floor of the mail sorting facility like scattered confetti. But these weren't celebration papers, they were termination notices. 47 of them. Her coworkers' names typed in cold, administrative font, each one a small death sentence in bureaucratic language. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their harsh glow over the cavernous warehouse where Elena had spent the last 8 years of her life. At 3:47 a.m., she was alone except for the night security guard who dozed fitfully near the loading dock. The smell of industrial cleaning solution mixed with the musty scent of thousands of letters, packages, and dreams deferred that passed through this place daily. Elena's hands shook as she gathered the papers. Her own name wasn't among them, not yet. But she knew it was coming. The rumors had been circulating for weeks. Automation, downsizing, efficiency improvements. Corporate speak for throwing away human lives like yesterday's junk mail. She thought of Maria Santos, whose locker was 3 down from hers. Maria had worked here for 15 years, sending money back to her family in El Salvador every month. There was James Wilson, the soft-spoken man who always brought homemade cookies for the break room, whose daughter was starting college in the fall. And Janet Kim, who'd just bought her first house, a tiny 2-bedroom ranch that she'd shown everyone pictures of with such pride. Elena pressed her back against the metal sorting cage, feeling the cold steel through her regulation postal uniform. The weight of the rifle case in her car seemed to call to her through the concrete walls. She'd driven straight here from the shooting range, still wearing her civilian clothes underneath the postal jacket she'd thrown on to enter the building. Her supervisor had given her the keys months ago, trusting her to handle the overnight mail sorting when they were short-staffed. Trust. What a fragile, precious thing. The shooting range had been her sanctuary for the past 2 years. Every weekend, sometimes twice a week, she'd drive the 43 miles to the private facility nestled in the mountains outside the city. It wasn't about the competition anymore, though she'd won 3 state championships and placed second. In nationals, it was about the silence. The perfect, crystalline moment when breath, heartbeat, and intention aligned. When the chaos of the world narrowed to a single point of focus, her rifle, a custom-built, precision instrument she'd named Esperanza, hope waited in its case in the trunk of her 2018 Honda Civic, the car her ex-husband had mocked, calling it a grocery getter while he drove his lifted truck to construction sites. The same ex-husband who'd laughed when she'd started competitive shooting, who'd called it a cute hobby right up until she'd outshot him and every other man at the local range. Creating this type of content requires significant time and effort. If you're finding value in this story, please like and share to help others discover it. Each machine represented hours of her life, years of repetitive motion that had worn grooves in her soul. She knew every squeak, every mechanical hiccup, every temperamental quirk of this place. The third sorter from the left would jam if you fed the letters too quickly. The conveyor belt on the west wall had a loose bearing that created a rhythmic tapping like a metallic heartbeat. She paused. At her workstation, running her fingers along the smooth edge of the metal desk, a small photo was taped to the corner, herself and her younger sister Carmen, at Carmen's graduation from nursing school. Carmen, who believed Elena was wasting her potential in this place. Carmen, who didn't understand that sometimes survival looked like showing up every day to a job that slowly killed your spirit. The termination notices crinkled in her grip. She could see the pattern now, the calculated cruelty of it. They weren't firing everyone at once. That would look bad, create too much attention. Instead, they were doing it in waves. First the older workers, the ones close to retirement who would be expensive to keep insured. Then the ones with families who couldn't easily relocate. Finally, they'd automate everything and keep a skeleton crew of part-timers with no benefits. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Carmen. Can't sleep. You working late again? Call me when you get home. She stared at the message, her vision blurring. Slightly. Carmen was 3 years younger, but had always been the stronger one. The one who'd made it out of their neighborhood through scholarships and sheer determination. Elena had been the quiet one, the one who'd married young and convinced herself that contentment was enough. But contentment was a luxury. She could no longer afford. The security camera in the corner was a dead eye, its red recording light a constant reminder that privacy was an illusion. Elena knew the system well enough to know that the cameras were more for show than actual security. Half of them weren't even connected to anything, and the ones that were recorded over themselves every 72 hours. Budget cuts, they'd been told. She walked to the small window that faced east, toward the mountains where the shooting range waited. Dawn was still hours away, but she could feel the promise of it in the air. The city sprawled below, millions of people sleeping in their beds, trusting that the infrastructure of their lives would hold, that their mail would be delivered, their packages would arrive, their small connections to the world would remain intact. Elena thought about the physics of long-distance shooting. Wind speed, humidity, barometric pressure, the Coriolis effect, how the Earth's rotation could nudge a bullet off course over extreme distances. She thought about the patience required, the way you had to become part of the landscape, invisible and still. Most of all, she thought about the moment of commitment, when you stopped breathing and let your finger complete its gentle squeeze. The longest confirmed sniper shot in history was 3,540 meters, just over 2 miles. It had been made by a Canadian Special Forces soldier in Iraq, a shot that took 10 seconds to reach its target. 10 seconds of flying through air, over a distance that most people couldn't even see clearly with the naked eye. Elena had never attempted anything close to that distance. Her personal best was 1,200 meters, achieved during a competition in Nevada where the desert air was so clear you could see individual rocks on distant mountainsides. But she'd been studying, reading everything she could find about extreme long-range shooting. The mathematics fascinated her, the way you could use equations to bend reality to your will. The termination notices felt heavier now, their weight multiplied by the knowledge of what they represented. Not just lost jobs, but lost dignity. Lost dreams. Lost faith in the idea that hard work and loyalty meant anything in a world run by algorithms and profit margins. She folded the papers carefully and placed them in her jacket pocket. Evidence, proof of what was coming. What had already been decided in boardrooms far from here by people who would never know the names of the workers they were discarding. Elena's reflection stared back at her from the darkened window. 34 years old, brown eyes that had seen too much, black hair pulled back in the practical ponytail she'd worn to work for 8 years. She looked ordinary, forgettable. The kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance. But behind those ordinary eyes was something else. A precision honed by thousands of hours of practice. A steadiness that came from knowing exactly who you were and what you were capable of. A quiet fury that had been building for years, compressed like a spring waiting for release. The clock on the wall ticked toward 4 a.m. In 3 hours, the day shift would arrive. Maria would hang up her coat and ask about Elena's weekend. James would distribute his cookies and ask if anyone had heard about the rumors. Janet would show more pictures of her house, pointing out the small improvements she'd been making, and Elena would have to look them in the eye, knowing what she knew. Carrying the weight of their futures in her pocket, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for Channel 7 News. Sarah Martinez, the investigative reporter who'd done the story about corruption in the city's housing authority. Elena had watched that report 3 times, studying the way Sarah had presented the evidence, the careful buildup of facts that made the truth undeniable. Her finger hovered over the call button. Once she made this call, there would be no going back. The comfortable numbness of her routine would be shattered forever. But as she stood there in the fluorescent-lit emptiness of the mail facility, surrounded by the machinery that would soon replace her and everyone she cared about, Elena realized that comfort had always been an illusion. Security was a lie they told themselves while the world shifted beneath their feet. She thought again of Esperanza, waiting in the darkness of her car. The rifle had been her grandfather's gift to her, purchased with money from his Social Security. Check when she'd told him about the competitions. "Mia," he'd said in his gravelly voice, "sometimes the world needs to see what we're capable of." Her grandfather had died 6 months ago, taking with him the last person who'd believed in her unconditionally. She'd kept shooting, but the joy had gone out of it. It had become mechanical, repetitive, like everything else in her life. Until now, Elena looked at her reflection again, and this time she saw something different. Not just the postal worker who sorted mail in the darkness. Not just the ex-wife who'd been left for someone younger. Not just the sister who'd never quite lived up to expectations. She saw the woman who could make a shot that would echo across the world. The question that had been building in her mind for weeks finally crystallized into something sharp and clear. What if there was a way to save her coworkers' jobs that nobody else had considered? What if the skills she'd spent years perfecting in silence could finally serve a purpose beyond trophies and personal satisfaction? What if the thing that made her different, her ability to hit targets at impossible distances, was exactly what this situation required? Elena's apartment smelled like instant coffee and disappointment. She sat at her kitchen table at 5:30 a.m. The termination notices spread before her like a tarot reading predicting doom. The morning light filtering through her blinds cast prison bar shadows across the documents, each stripe another reminder of the cage her life had become. Her daily routine was a study in quiet desperation. Wake at 5 a.m., shower in exactly 7 minutes to conserve hot water, dress in the same rotation of 3 work outfits, eat toast with generic peanut butter while reading news on her phone, drive the same route to work, park in the same spot, 3rd row, under the broken streetlight that maintenance had been promising to fix for 8 months. Clock in at exactly 6:55 a.m. But today was different. Today she sat staring at evidence of systematic betrayal, while her rifle case leaned against the wall like a question mark punctuating her existence. Elena's phone rang. Carmen's name flashed on the screen. "You never called me back last night," Carmen said without preamble. "I was worried." "I'm fine," Elena lied, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "Just had some extra work to finish." "Elena." Carmen's voice carried that particular mix of affection and exasperation that only sisters could master. "You've been saying you're fine for 2 years, ever since the divorce. But fine people don't work 60-hour weeks at a job that pays them. Like it's 1995. Elena walked to her window, looking out at the apartment complex's parking lot. A few early commuters were scraping frost from their windshields, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that their world was built on foundations of sand. "Did you know," Elena said, "that the average postal worker makes less now, adjusted for inflation, than they did in 1980? And that's if they can even get full-time hours. That single quotes S. specific. Are you okay?" Elena almost laughed. Was she okay? She was 34 years old, living paycheck to paycheck in a 1-bedroom apartment with walls so thin she could hear her neighbors' Netflix shows. Her ex-husband had taken half of everything in the divorce, including her confidence. Her mother called once a month to ask when she was going to get her life together and find a real job. Her coworkers were about to lose their livelihoods, and she was the only one who knew it was coming. "I need to tell you something," Elena said, sitting back down at the table. "But first, tell me about your patients yesterday." Carmen worked in the IQ at City General, pulling 12-hour shifts. That would break most people. But she talked about her work with a passion that Elena envied. Every patient was a puzzle to solve, a life to save, a family to comfort. Carmen had found her calling early and pursued it with single-minded determination. "We had a car accident." "Victim," Carmen said, her voice softening. 22 years old, motorcycle versus semi-truck. The odds weren't good, but Dr. Patterson said his fighting spirit was incredible. "Sometimes I think survival is just a matter of refusing to give up." Elena picked up one of the termination notices, studying the signature at the bottom. District Manager Michael Hoffman, a man she'd met exactly twice in 8 years. Both times he'd looked through her, like she was transparent. "Carmen," she said, "what would you do if you knew something terrible was going to happen to good people, and you were the only one who could stop it?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's oddly philosophical for 5:30 in the morning. Are you in some kind of trouble?" Elena closed her eyes, seeing the shooting range in her mind. The way the morning mist would rise from the valley floor, creating natural wind flags that helped her read the air currents. The weight of Esperanza in her hands, perfectly balanced, an extension of her will. The satisfaction of watching a bullet travel a distance that seemed impossible, arriving exactly where she'd intended it to go. "Do you remember when we were kids," Elena said, "and you used to dare me to climb higher and higher in that old oak tree behind Abuela's house?" "You always went higher than I expected," Carmen said. "Mom used to get so mad at both of us. She said you were going to fall and break your neck. But I never fell. No, you never fell. You had this steadiness. Even when the wind was blowing and the branches were swaying, you just hold on and wait for the right moment to climb higher." Elena smiled, remembering the feeling of being above the world, seeing patterns and connections that were invisible from ground level. "I think I need to climb higher again." After Carmen hung up, Elena sat in the growing morning light, thinking about the conversation. Her sister was right. She'd always been the steady one, the one who could wait and watch and choose exactly the right moment to act. It was a skill she'd carried into competitive shooting, where patience was more valuable than speed. She opened her laptop and began researching. Michael Hoffman had been promoted to district manager 3 years ago, after the previous manager had suffered a convenient heart attack during the corruption investigation. Hoffman's background was corporate efficiency consulting, which was a polite way of saying he fired people for a living. The deeper Elena dug, the clearer the pattern became. Hoffman had implemented similar modernization programs at 4 other postal facilities across 3 states. Each time, the result was the same: massive layoffs followed by automation. Contracts awarded to his brother-in-law's technology company. Elena found photos from a trade conference, where Hoffman had given a presentation titled "Human Resource Optimization in the Digital Age." In the pictures, he was smiling broadly, shaking hands with executives from automation companies. In one photo, he was accepting an award for innovation in workplace efficiency. She stared at his face on the screen. 53 years old, thinning hair, expensive suit. He looked like every middle manager who'd ever explained why the company couldn't afford raises while posting record profits. The kind of man who used phrases like human capital and redundancy elimination, without ever thinking about the actual humans involved. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Working a double today. Miguel has another doctor's appointment. These medical bills are killing us." Miguel was Maria's 8-year-old son, born with a rare genetic condition that required constant monitoring and expensive treatments. Maria worked every hour of overtime she could get, sending most of her paycheck to doctors and specialists. The Job's health insurance was barely adequate, but it was better than nothing. Another text, this one from James. "Brought extra cookies today, chocolate chip." Helen loved the last batch so much she asked for the recipe. Helen was James's wife, of 38 years, currently in the early stages of Alzheimer's. James had confided to Elena that the routine of baking helped Helen remember who she was, at least for a few hours at a time. The Job's insurance covered some of her care, but not enough. James had been talking about taking early retirement to spend more time with her while she still recognized him. A third text from Janet: got the promotion, assistant supervisor. 25 cents more per hour and actual benefits. Dreams do come true. Elena stared at Janet's message, feeling something break inside her chest. Janet didn't know yet that her promotion would last exactly long enough for her to train her own replacement. A sorting machine that could process twice as much mail in half the time. She walked to her closet and opened the door, revealing her collection of shooting trophies and medals arranged on a small shelf. First place at the Western States Precision Shooting Championship. Second place at the National Long Range Competition. Winner of the Mountain Division's Accuracy Challenge 3 years running. But the most important item wasn't a trophy. It was a photograph tucked behind the others, showing a younger Elena with her grandfather at her first competition. She was holding a rifle almost as tall as she was, grinning widely despite having finished dead last. Her grandfather stood beside her, his weathered hand on her shoulder, looking at her like she'd just conquered the world. "It's not about winning, Mia," he'd told her that day. "It's about knowing what you're capable of." Elena picked up the photograph, remembering how her grandfather had saved for months to buy her that first rifle. How he'd driven her to competitions across 3 states, sleeping in his truck to save money on hotel rooms. How he'd sit in the stands for hours watching her practice, never offering advice unless she asked for it. He'd been a mechanical engineer before retiring, the kind of man who could look at a complex problem and see elegant solutions that others missed. During the last months of his life, as cancer slowly claimed him, he'd spent hours teaching Elena about ballistics, about wind patterns, about the mathematics of precision shooting. "You have a gift," he'd told her near the end. "But gifts are meant to be used, not hidden away." Elena set down the photograph and walked to her kitchen window. She could see the postal facility in the distance, a gray concrete block squatting among the industrial buildings like a bureaucratic toad. From this angle, it looked small, insignificant. But she knew the building's layout by heart, knew every entrance and exit, every sightline and blind spot. Her laptop chimed with an email notification. Elena opened it, expecting spam or a bill, but instead found a message from the director of the shooting range where she practiced. The subject line read, "Invitation to Extreme Long Range Challenge." "Elena," the email began, "based on your consistent performance and demonstrated skills, you're invited to participate in a special challenge event next month. We'll be attempting shots at distances up to 2,500 meters using advanced weather monitoring equipment. This is invitation only, limited to our top 12 shooters." Elena read the message 3 times. 2,500 meters. Nearly a mile and a half. It was farther than she'd ever attempted, farther than most people could even see clearly. The kind of distance that separated recreational shooters from true artists of precision. She looked at the clock. 6:15 a.m. In 40 minutes, she needed to leave for work, where she'd spend 8 hours sorting mail alongside people who didn't know their jobs were already gone. She'd smile and make small talk and pretend that everything was normal while carrying the weight of their futures in her pocket. Or she could do something else. Elena opened a new browser tab and searched for longest confirmed sniper shot. The results showed a progression of records, each one pushing the boundaries of what seemed possible. 3,540 meters. 3,772 meters. And just last year, an unconfirmed report of a shot at 4,200 meters over, 2.5 miles, 4,200 meters. Elena tried to visualize that distance, imagining her bullet traveling for nearly 11 seconds before reaching its target. 11 seconds during which wind patterns could shift, temperature could change. The Earth itself could rotate enough to throw off the trajectory, but it was possible. The mathematics worked. With the right equipment, the right conditions, and the right shooter, even impossible distances became achievable. Elena pulled up a mapping application and measured the distance from the mountains behind the shooting range to the postal facility. The direct line was 7.6 kilometers, 4.7 miles. Farther than any confirmed shot in history, but not impossible. She closed the laptop and walked to her rifle case. Esperanza waited inside, broken down into components and nestled in custom foam. Padding. Elena ran her fingers along the barrel, feeling the slight imperfections that made this weapon unique. Every rifle had its own personality, its own quirks and preferences. She knew this one better than she knew herself. The phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. Elena Vasquez. The voice was professional, slightly nasal. "This is Michael Hoffman from District Management. I need you to come in early today. We have some administrative matters to discuss." Elena's blood turned to ice. What kind of administrative matters? Nothing to worry about. Just some paperwork regarding facility reorganization. Can you be here by 7:30? Elena looked at the termination notices scattered across her table. "I'll be there." After Hoffman hung up, Elena sat in the silence of her apartment, feeling the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. She thought about her coworkers, already on their way to jobs they didn't know they were about to lose. She thought about her grandfather, who'd believed she was capable of extraordinary things. She thought about Carmen, who dedicated her life to saving people. And she thought about 4.7 miles of empty air between the mountains and the postal facility, a distance that had never been bridged by human precision, but just might be possible for someone with the right combination of skill, determination, and absolute certainty that some things were worth fighting for. Elena opened her rifle case and began assembling Esperanza with practiced efficiency. Each component clicked into place with satisfying precision, the weapon taking shape like a physical manifestation of her will. Outside her window, the sun was rising over a world that was about to change in ways no one could predict. The district office smelled like corporate disinfectant and broken dreams. Elena sat in the waiting area outside Michael Hoffman's office, watching a receptionist who couldn't have been older than 22 file her nails with mechanical precision. The girl's nameplate read Stephanie, Administrative Assistant, and she wore the kind of forced smile that came with minimum wage and no benefits. "Mr. Hoffman will see you now," Stephanie chirped. Not looking up from her manicure. Elena entered the office and immediately understood why Hoffman had been so successful at destroying lives. The room was designed to intimidate. Massive desk, positioned to put visitors at a psychological disadvantage. Framed diplomas and awards covering every wall. Floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the postal facility below. It was the office of a man who'd confused authority with power and competence with cruelty. Hoffman himself was smaller than Elena had expected, with the soft physique of someone who'd spent decades behind a desk. But his eyes were sharp, calculating. The eyes of a predator who'd learned to hunt in boardrooms instead of forests. "Elena Vasquez," he said, not bothering to stand or offer his hand. 8 years of service. Excellent attendance record. No disciplinary actions. He flipped through a file folder. "But your productivity numbers have been declining." Elena kept her expression neutral. "Declining how?" "Mail sorting efficiency is down 12% over the past 6 months. Time spent per package has increased by 8%. These are significant metrics in our modernization analysis." The words hit Elena like physical blows. Modernization analysis, the clinical language used to disguise human suffering. She thought of the rifle case in her car, locked in the trunk but calling to her through steel and concrete. "I wasn't aware." I was being timed that precisely, Elena said. Hoffman smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Everything is measured now, Elena. That's the beauty of data-driven management. We can identify inefficiencies before they become problems. He opened another folder, this one thicker than the first. Elena caught a glimpse of architectural drawings, technical specifications, budget projections. The blueprints for replacing human beings with machines. We're implementing a comprehensive facility upgrade, Hoffman continued. New automated sorting. Equipment, optimized workflow patterns, streamlined personnel allocation. It's going to revolutionize how we serve the community. Elena felt something cold and sharp settling in her stomach. What does that mean for current employees? Well, that's why you're here. Hoffman leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking like old bones. We need experienced workers to help with the transition. Training the new systems, supervising the installation process. It's an opportunity for advancement. The lie was so brazen that Elena almost laughed. Advancement. Absolutely. We're looking at promoting several current employees to supervisory roles. Better pay, increased responsibility, leadership opportunities. Hoffman's smile widened. Of course not. Everyone will be selected for these positions. We need people who are adaptable, who understand that progress sometimes requires difficult choices. Elena stared at him, seeing the trap being laid with bureaucratic precision. Train your replacements, betray your coworkers, and maybe we'll keep you around long enough to manage your own elimination. How long do we have to decide? She asked. The installation begins next month. We'll need training supervisors in place by then. Hoffman closed the files and looked directly at Elena. I'm offering this to you because your background suggests you might have the right temperament for management. Sometimes leadership means making choices that others can't. Elena thought about the shooting range, about the moment when you had to commit to a shot despite impossible odds, about the stillness required to hit targets at distances that defied belief, about her grandfather's voice. You have a gift, Mia. But gifts are meant to be used. Can I think about it? Of course. But don't take too long. Hoffman's tone carried a subtle threat. Opportunities like this don't come around often. Elena left the office feeling like she'd been contaminated by something toxic. The drive back to the postal facility took her past a billboard advertising the city's economic development success story. New businesses, lower unemployment, progress and prosperity for all. The irony was bitter enough to taste. She found Maria in the break room, counting pills into a small plastic organizer. Elena recognized the routine. Maria's son Miguel required a complex medication schedule to manage his condition. How did it go with the district office? Maria asked, not looking up from her pills. Elena sat down across from her, studying the exhaustion etched into Maria's face. 15 years of night shifts and overtime. 15 years of choosing between sleep and spending time with her son. 15 years of believing that hard work and loyalty would eventually pay off. They want me to help with some new training program, Elena said. Training for what? Elena felt the weight of the termination notices in her jacket pocket. New equipment. Automation upgrades. Maria finally looked up, and Elena saw something. Flicker in her eyes, a moment of recognition, quickly suppressed. That sounds good. Better technology, right? Right. But they both knew what automation really meant. Elena had watched it happen in manufacturing, in retail, in every industry where human labor could be reduced to repetitive motions and replaced by machines. The promise was always the same: increased efficiency, reduced costs, better service. The reality was always unemployment, broken communities, and a world that valued productivity over people. Doc James appeared in the doorway, carrying a plate of cookies wrapped in foil. Ladies, fresh from Helen's kitchen. Well, fresh from my kitchen, but using Helen's recipe. Elena accepted a cookie. Taste in chocolate and butter, and the love of a man trying to hold on to his wife's fading memories through flour and sugar. How is Helen doing? James's smile dimmed slightly. Good days and bad days. Yesterday she remembered our first date in perfect detail. Today she asked me who I was. He sat down heavily. The doctor says we need to start thinking about options. Professional care. Elena did quick math in her head. Professional care for Alzheimer's patients could cost $6,000 a month or more. James's postal worker salary, even with overtime, would never cover it. His health insurance had lifetime caps and exclusions that made comprehensive care impossible. The Job's insurance is pretty good though, right? Maria said, clearly trying to offer hope. It's better than nothing, James replied, which wasn't really an answer. Elena excused herself and walked to the main sorting floor, where the machines hummed with mechanical efficiency. She paused at each workstation, really looking at it for the first time in years. The repetitive motions, the careful sorting by zip code and delivery route, the attention to detail required to ensure that every piece of mail reached its intended destination. It was skilled work, despite what the corporate efficiency experts claimed. It required reading comprehension, spatial reasoning, manual dexterity, and the kind of reliability that couldn't be programmed into a machine. But none of that mattered when machines could work 24 hours a day without breaks, without benefits, without the inconvenient humanity that made workers ask for raises and respect. Elena pulled out her phone and called the shooting range. The director, a retired Marine named Frank Castellanos, answered on the second ring. Elena, got my email about the Extreme Long Range Challenge? I did. Frank, I need to ask you something hypothetical. Shoot. Elena almost smiled at the unintended pun. What would be the longest possible shot using conventional precision rifle techniques? I mean absolute maximum distance, perfect conditions, everything going right. Frank was quiet for a moment. That's a hell of a hypothetical question. Why? Research project. Theoretical maximum human accuracy. Well, Frank said slowly, the current record is 3,772 meters, achieved by a Canadian sniper team. But that was under perfect conditions with specialized equipment. The bullet took about 9.5 seconds to reach the target. What about farther? Say 4 miles? 4 miles. Frank's voice sharpened. Elena, that's over 6,000 meters. No one's ever attempted anything close to that distance. The ballistics alone would be incredibly complex. Wind patterns, temperature gradients. The Coriolis effect becomes significant at that range. You'd need perfect weather, specialized ammunition, and He paused. Why are you really asking? Elena watched her coworkers moving through their routines, unaware that each sorted letter brought them closer to unemployment, just curious about theoretical limits. Theoretical limits are one thing. Practical application is something else entirely. A shot at that distance would require mathematical precision beyond anything attempted before. We're talking about calculating bullet drop measured in dozens of feet, wind drift that could throw you off by hundreds of yards. But it's possible? Mathematically? Maybe? In reality? Frank sighed. Elena, you're one of the best shooters I've ever worked with. But 6,000 meters isn't just difficult. It's never been done because it's probably impossible. After hanging up, Elena walked to the facility's loading dock, where she could see the mountains in the distance. The peaks were hazy with morning mist, but she could make out the shooting range's approximate location, 4.7 miles. The distance looked insignificant from here, just empty air between 2 points on a map, but Elena knew that air wasn't empty. It was filled with variables, wind currents that shifted with temperature changes, humidity that affected bullet trajectory, atmospheric pressure that could alter the speed of sound itself. Every factor would have to be calculated, measured, accounted for with mathematical precision, Her phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "Heard you got called to the district office. Hope it's good news. Maybe they're finally recognizing your skills." Elena stared at the message, feeling the weight of Janet's optimism like a physical burden. How do you tell someone that their dreams are about to be crushed by economic forces beyond their control? How do you explain that their hard work and dedication mean nothing to people who see them as line items on a spreadsheet? Another text. This one from Carmen. "Can't stop thinking about our conversation. Are you sure you're okay? You sounded ... different." Elena was different. The woman who'd walked into Hoffman's office that morning had been a postal worker who sorted mail and shot targets on weekends. The woman standing on this loading dock was something else entirely. Someone who'd seen the future and decided it was unacceptable. Someone who was beginning to understand what her grandfather had meant about gifts being meant to be used. She pulled up the weather forecast on her phone. High pressure system moving in from the west. Clear skies expected for the next 5 days. Minimal wind predicted for early morning hours. Perfect shooting conditions. Elena walked back inside and found Hoffman's business card on the bulletin board near the supervisor's office. District Manager Michael Hoffman, with his office phone number, email address, and cell phone listed for emergencies. She memorized the numbers, then looked up his home address in the employee directory. Michael Hoffman lived in Riverside Estates, an exclusive gated community 43 miles from the postal facility. Elena had driven past it once, delivering a package that required signature confirmation. She remembered the guardhouse, the perfectly manicured lawns, the sense of separation from the real world, where most people lived. She thought about the physics of extreme long-range shooting. At 4.7 miles, a bullet would travel for approximately 13 seconds before reaching its target. 13 seconds during which the Earth would rotate enough to shift the point of impact by several feet. The Coriolis effect, named after a French mathematician who'd never imagined his equations being used to bridge impossible distances with deadly precision. Elena's shift ended at 3 p.m., but she stayed late to help with package processing. Maria was working a double shift to cover medical expenses, and Elena quietly took on extra duties to ease her friend's workload. They worked in companionable silence, sorting mail with the efficiency of long practice. At 6 p.m., Elena finally clocked out and walked to her car. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few vehicles belonging to the night shift workers. Elena's Honda Civic sat under the broken streetlight, anonymous and forgettable, exactly what she needed. She drove home through rush hour traffic, her mind working through ballistics calculations with the same methodical precision she used to sort mail. Bullet velocity, air density, gravitational drop over extreme distance. The mathematics were complex but not impossible. Her grandfather had taught her that every problem could be solved if you broke it down into manageable components. Elena's apartment felt different when she entered. The familiar surroundings, her small kitchen table, the trophies on the shelf, the photograph of her grandfather seemed charged with new significance. This wasn't just her home anymore. It was the command center for something unprecedented. She opened her laptop and began researching in earnest. Ballistics calculators, weather prediction models, topographical maps of the area between the shooting range and the postal facility. The internet was a treasure trove of information for anyone patient enough to dig through forums, technical manuals, and military documents that had been declassified and digitized. Elena discovered that extreme, long-range shooting was more than just marksmanship. It was applied physics. Wind speed had to be measured not just at the shooting position, but estimated along the entire flight path. Temperature differentials could cause bullets to rise or fall unpredictably. Even the altitude difference between starting point and target affected the trajectory. Her phone rang. Carmen's name appeared on the screen. "You missed dinner, Carmen," said without preamble. Mom made her arroz con palo, and you know how she gets when someone doesn't show up after saying they would. Elena had completely forgotten about the family dinner. I'm sorry, work ran late, and I got caught up in something. Elena, this isn't like you. You never miss family dinner, and you've been acting strange all week. What's going on? Elena stared at her laptop screen, which displayed a detailed wind map of the mountain valley. How could she explain to her sister that she was planning something that would either save her coworkers' jobs or destroy her own life? How could she make Carmen understand that sometimes the only choice was between action and complicity? Do you remember when Papa used to tell us stories about the old country? Elena asked. About people who had to make impossible choices? Elena, you're scaring me. What impossible choice are you talking about? Elena closed her eyes, seeing her grandfather's weathered face, hearing his voice telling stories about ordinary people who'd done extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it. Sometimes good people have to break rules to protect what matters. That sounds like something someone says right before they do something stupid and dangerous. Elena almost laughed at her sister's intuition. I'm not going to do anything stupid. But dangerous? Elena didn't answer directly. Carmen, if something happens to me, I need you to know that I love you, and that everything I've done has been to protect people who can't protect themselves. Elena, you're talking like you're planning to die. Stop it. Whatever you're thinking about doing, just stop and talk to me first. I have to go. Give my love to Mom. Elena hung up before Carmen could respond, then turned off her phone. From now on, she needed to minimize contact with people who might try to stop her or who could be implicated in what was coming. She returned to her research, diving deeper into the technical aspects of extreme long-range shooting. The Canadian sniper who'd made the current record shot had used a specialized rifle system, custom ammunition, and had been assisted by a team of spotters with advanced weather monitoring equipment. Elena would be working alone with standard competition grade equipment, but she had advantages that the record holders hadn't possessed. She knew the terrain intimately, having shot at the range hundreds of times under varying conditions. She understood the local weather patterns, the way wind moved through the mountain valleys at different times of day. Most importantly, she had something that no record attempt had ever had: absolute moral certainty. Elena opened the termination notices and spread them across her table again. 47 names, 47 lives that would be destroyed by Michael Hoffman's modernization program. She thought about Maria's medical bills, James's wife, Janet's new house that she'd never be able to afford without her postal salary. Then she thought about Hoffman himself, sitting in his corner office, calculating human misery with the same detachment she used to calculate bullet trajectories. The difference was that her calculations were meant to hit targets. His were meant to hit people. Elena's doorbell rang at 9 p.m. She looked through the peephole and saw Carmen standing in the hallway holding a bag from their mother's restaurant. I brought you dinner, Carmen said when Elena opened the door, and I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on. Carmen pushed past Elena into the apartment, then stopped short when she saw the laptop screen full of ballistics data and the termination notices scattered across the table. Elena, Carmen said slowly, why do you have what looks like firing calculations on your computer? Elena considered lying, but she was tired of deception. Because I'm planning to make the longest sniper shot in history. Carmen stared at her for a long moment, then carefully set down the food bag. Okay, let's assume for a second that you're not having a complete psychological break. Why would you want to do that? Elena showed her sister the termination notices, explaining about Hoffman's automation program and the systematic destruction of her coworkers' livelihoods. She talked about the meeting that morning, about the casual cruelty with which Hoffman had described his plans. So you're planning to, what, shoot him? Carmen's voice was carefully controlled, the tone she used with psychiatric patients who were having violent ideations. Not shoot him, Elena said. Scare him. Make a shot so precise, so impossible, that he'll know someone is watching him. Someone who can reach him from distances he can't even imagine. Carmen sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Elena, listen to yourself. You're talking about using a rifle to intimidate someone. That's terrorism. Is it terrorism when corporations systematically destroy communities for profit? Is it terrorism when executives get bonuses for firing workers? Elena's voice rose with frustration. Where's the moral outrage when the violence is economic instead of physical? Two wrongs don't make a right, but doing nothing makes you complicit. Carmen picked up one of the termination notices, reading it carefully. This is horrible, Elena. These people don't deserve this. But there have to be legal ways to fight it. Unions, labor lawyers, media attention. I tried the media, Elena said. I called Channel 7 News this morning. They said they'd look into it, which means they filed my number under crazy person. And forgot about it. Unions have no power anymore. Labor lawyers cost money that workers don't have. Elena walked to her rifle case and opened it, revealing Esperanza in all her precision-engineered glory. The weapon gleamed under the apartment's fluorescent lights, every surface carefully maintained, every component perfectly calibrated. You named your gun, Carmen observed. Esperanza. Hope. And you think hope is going to solve this problem by threatening someone. Elena ran her fingers along the rifle's barrel, feeling the slight imperfections that made this weapon unique among thousands of others. I think hope is going to show Michael Hoffman that his actions have consequences. That someone is watching. That the people he's destroying aren't as powerless as he thinks. Carmen stood up and paced to the window, looking out at the city lights. Elena, even if you could make this impossible shot, and I'm not saying you, Ken, what makes you think it would change anything? What's to stop him from just calling the police and having you arrested? Because he won't know it was me. The shot will come from 4.7 miles away, from a location with no direct line of sight to where he'll be. It will seem impossible, supernatural almost. He'll know someone with extraordinary skills is watching him, but he won't know who or how. And then what? He cancels the automation program out of fear? Elena had been thinking about this part of the plan all day. No, then he becomes paranoid, starts making mistakes. Meanwhile, I document everything, the automation contracts, the financial connections to his brother-in-law's company, the systematic destruction of jobs while he profits. When he's rattled and not thinking clearly, I release everything to the media with evidence that can't be ignored. Carmen turned back to face her sister. That's actually not completely insane. But why the shooting? Why not just gather the evidence and release it? Because evidence without leverage is just noise. People release evidence of corruption every day and nothing happens. But evidence combined with the knowledge that someone with impossible skills is watching, that creates real pressure. Elena opened a folder on her laptop, showing Carmen the research she'd compiled. Photos of Hoffman accepting awards, financial records showing suspicious payments, email correspondence discussing human resource optimization. The foundation of a story that could destroy his career if presented properly. You've been busy, Carmen said, scrolling through the documents. I've been awake. Carmen sat back down at the table, studying her sister's face. You're really going to do this, aren't you? I'm really going to try. What if something goes wrong? What if you miss? Elena smiled grimly. I don't miss. What? If the police trace the shot back to you? 4.7 miles, Carmen. No one has ever made a shot at that distance before. They won't even know where to start looking. Carmen picked up the photograph of Elena with their grandfather, studying the image of two generations united by precision and purpose. What would Abuelo say about this? Elena took the photograph from her sister's hands, looking at her grandfather's proud smile. He'd say that gifts are meant to be used. And that sometimes good people have to do hard things to protect what matters. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of Elena's decision settling between them like a third presence in the room. Finally, Carmen spoke. "If you're determined to do this, you're not doing it alone." Elena looked up sharply. "Carmen, no. I won't let you. I'm not talking about helping you shoot anyone. I'm talking about being your medical support. If something goes wrong, if you get hurt, you'll need someone who knows how to handle trauma situations. This isn't a game, Carmen. If I get caught, anyone helping me goes to prison too. Then don't get caught." Carmen's voice carried the same steel that had gotten her through nursing school and 4 years in the ICU. "But if you're going to risk everything to save your friends, you're not doing it without backup." Elena felt something ease in her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The prospect of facing this alone had been terrifying in ways she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. "There's something else," Elena said. "The timing has to be perfect. Hoffman will be at the facility tomorrow morning for the automation presentation. The weather forecast shows ideal conditions, clear skies, minimal wind. If I'm going to do this, it has to be tomorrow." Carmen closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Tomorrow. Jesus, Elena. Couldn't you have given me more time to process this? Time is what we don't have. Every day Hoffman's plan moves forward. Is another day closer to those termination notices becoming reality." Elena showed Carmen the shooting range's location on a topographical map, tracing the line of sight to the postal facility. The distance was staggering when displayed graphically, a thin line stretching across mountains and valleys, over terrain that would challenge even the most advanced military equipment. "The longest confirmed sniper kill is 3,772 meters, Elena said. "What I'm planning is 7,600 meters, almost exactly twice that distance." Carmen studied the map, her nurse's training helping her visualize the complexities involved. "What are you going to shoot at? You said you're not trying to kill him." Elena pulled up another document on her laptop, architectural drawings of the postal facility. "There's a flagpole in the courtyard outside the main building, 50 feet from where Hoffman will be giving his presentation, completely isolated from any people. I'm going to put a bullet through the rope holding the flag." Carmen stared at the plans. "You're going to cut down a flag from 4.7 miles away. The rope is about half an inch in diameter. At that distance, hitting it will require accuracy measured in fractions of inches. It's a shot that will seem impossible to anyone who witnesses it. Because it is impossible." Elena smiled, feeling the familiar calm that came with committing to a difficult shot. "That's what makes it perfect." The apartment fell quiet again as both sisters contemplated the magnitude of what Elena was proposing. Outside, the city continued its nightly routine, unaware that tomorrow would bring an attempt to rewrite the boundaries of human precision. Finally, Carmen spoke. "I need to call in sick tomorrow. And you need to walk me through exactly what you're planning, step by step." Elena opened her laptop and began pulling up weather data, ballistics calculators, and topographical maps. For the next 3 hours, she walked Carmen through every aspect of the plan: the drive to the shooting range before dawn, the setup process that would take nearly an hour, the precise timing required to coordinate with Hoffman's presentation. "The bullet will travel for approximately 13 seconds, Elena explained. "During that time I have to account for wind drift, gravitational drop, the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, even temperature variations along the flight path." Carmen took notes in the precise handwriting she developed during nursing. "School. What about after? Win or lose, what happens next? If I make the shot, I pack up and drive home. The evidence gets released to every media outlet simultaneously, along with a statement explaining that Michael Hoffman is being watched by someone who doesn't miss. And if you don't make the shot?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Then I've fired. A bullet that will land somewhere in the valley, completely harmless. And Hoffman never knows how close he came to being the target of the longest sniper shot in history. Carmen looked up from her notes. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Elena met her sister's eyes. If I don't make the shot, then 47 good people lose their jobs, and Michael Hoffman gets promoted for his efficiency improvements. That's not acceptable. So you'll try again? I'll try until I succeed or until I can't try anymore. Carmen closed her notebook and stood up. I need to go home and prepare for tomorrow. Medical supplies, emergency protocols, communication equipment. She paused at the door. Elena, I want you to promise me something. What? Promise me that no matter what happens tomorrow, you won't forget that you're a good person doing this. For the right reasons. Don't let this change who you are. Elena looked at the rifle case, then at the termination notices, then at the photograph of her grandfather. I promise. After Carmen left, Elena spent the remaining hours before dawn making final preparations. She cleaned and calibrated Esperanza with obsessive care, loaded custom ammunition that she'd been developing for extreme long-range competition, and packed her equipment with military precision. At 3 a.m., she allowed herself one last look around. Her apartment. The trophies on the shelf, the photographs on the wall, the simple furniture of a simple life. Tomorrow, win or lose, this version of Elena Vasquez would cease to exist. She would either become the woman who'd made the impossible shot, or the woman who'd tried and failed. But she would no longer be the woman who'd sat in silence while good people suffered. Elena picked up her keys, shouldered her rifle case, and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. The mountains waited in the distance, shrouded in mist and possibility. The shooting range at 4:30 a.m. was a cathedral of silence and mist. Elena drove through the gates with her headlights cutting through fog, so thick she could barely see the road markers. The familiar crunch of gravel under her tires was the only sound in a world that seemed suspended between night and day. Frank Castellanos emerged from the range office as Elena parked, steam rising from a coffee mug in his weathered hands. His expression was curious rather than surprised. Longtime range members often arrived before dawn to take advantage of perfect morning conditions. Early start today, Frank said, approaching Elena's car. Perfect weather for precision work. No wind, stable temperature, visibility that'll be crystal clear once this mist burns off. Elena popped her trunk and retrieved her rifle case, along with a spotting scope and tripod she'd never used for distances this extreme. I want to try some longer shots today. Push my limits. Frank's eyebrows rose slightly. How much longer? Maybe farther than anyone's tried before. Frank set down his coffee mug and studied Elena's face in the dim light from the range building. 25 years of working with precision. Shooters had taught him to recognize the signs when someone was carrying more than just equipment. Elena, yesterday you called asking about theoretical maximum distances. Now you're here before dawn talking about pushing limits farther than anyone's tried. What's really going on? Elena shouldered her rifle case and picked up the spotting scope. Sometimes you have to find out what you're really capable of. Frank followed her toward the range, his boots crunching on frost-covered grass. The longest documented precision shot is 3,772 meters. That's over 2 miles, under perfect conditions, with specialized military equipment. What kind of distance are you thinking about? Elena stopped at the range's highest elevation point, a concrete shooting platform that offered an unobstructed view across the valley. She could see the city in the distance, its lights twinkling like stars scattered across the darkness. Somewhere among those lights, Michael Hoffman was probably sleeping peacefully in his expensive bed, unaware that his world was about to change. 4.7 miles, Elena said quietly. Frank nearly dropped his coffee. Elena, that's over 7,000 meters. No one has ever attempted anything close to that distance. The ballistics alone would be, I know the ballistics. Elena began unpacking her equipment with practiced efficiency. Bullet drop of approximately 1,200 feet. Wind drift potentially measured in hundreds of yards. Flight time of 13 seconds. Coriolis effect significant enough to throw the shot off by several feet. Frank watched her assemble Esperanza with the reverence of someone handling a religious artifact. You've been doing research. I've been doing math. Elena attached the spotting scope to its tripod and began the delicate process of aligning it with her intended target. Through the powerful optics, she could make out the postal facility's distinctive rectangular profile. At this distance, it looked like a toy building, impossibly small and fragile. "Elena," Frank said carefully, "what exactly are you planning to shoot at from 4.7 miles away?" Elena adjusted the scope's focus, bringing the facility's details into sharp relief. She could see the flagpole in the courtyard, its American flag hanging limp in the still morning air. In a few hours, that courtyard would be filled with postal workers listening to Michael Hoffman explain why their jobs were being eliminated. "There's a flagpole," Elena said. "I want to see if I can hit the rope that holds the flag." Frank looked through the spotting scope, following Elena's line of sight across the impossible distance. "You want to cut down a flag from 4.7 miles away. That's right." Frank was quiet for several minutes, studying the target through the scope, while Elena continued her equipment setup. Finally, he straightened up and looked at her directly. "Elena, I've been working with precision shooters for 25 years. I've seen people attempt shots that seemed impossible and pull them off. Through skill, preparation, and luck. But what you're talking about isn't just impossible, it's never been done because the variables are too complex for human calculation." Elena locked her rifle into its bipod and began the careful process of zeroing her scope for extreme distance. Every shot seems impossible until someone makes it. This is different. At 7,600 meters, you're not just fighting physics, you're fighting the limitations of human perception. You can't see a rope that thin at that distance, even with the best optics. You'd be shooting at a target you can't clearly identify, over terrain with wind patterns you can't predict. Elena peered through her rifle scope, using the spotting scope's data to align her shot. The mathematical calculations flowed through her mind like a meditation, each variable carefully considered and accounted for. Wind speed, 3 miles per hour from the southwest. Temperature, 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure, 30.15 inches of mercury. Altitude difference, 847 feet of elevation drop from shooting position to target. "Frank," she said without looking up from her scope, "what if I told you that making this shot wasn't just about proving it could be done? What if I told you that good people's lives depended on it?" Frank was quiet for a long moment. "I'd say that sounds like the kind of thinking that gets people into serious trouble." Elena made a minute adjustment to her scope's windage dial. Sometimes trouble is better than complicity. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. The morning mist was starting to burn off, revealing the valley in crystalline detail. Elena could see individual buildings now, cars moving along distant highways, the geometric patterns of suburban neighborhoods spreading like cells across the landscape. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Elena ignored it, maintaining her focus on the delicate calibration process. Another buzz, then another. Finally, Frank picked up the phone and read the messages. "Carmen says she's in position at the city medical center," Frank reported. "She also says to remind you that you promised not to forget who you are." Elena looked up sharply. "How do you know Carmen?" Frank smiled grimly. "Because she called me at 5 a.m. this morning, explained the situation, and asked if I thought her sister was completely insane. I told her that insanity and genius often look identical from the outside." Elena felt a mixture of gratitude and exasperation. Carmen had obviously decided that Elena needed more support than she'd been willing to accept. "What else did she tell you?" Enough to know that Michael Hoffman is about to have a very bad morning. Frank picked up his coffee mug and took a sip. She also told me about the termination notices. 47 people. Elena returned her attention to the rifle scope, fine-tuning the focus until the distant flagpole appeared as sharp as her equipment would allow. At this magnification, the flag itself was barely visible, a small rectangle of color hanging from an almost invisible line. "Those people don't deserve what's happening to them," Elena said, double quotes. "No, they don't. But there are legal ways to fight corporate corruption. Legal ways that take years and usually fail. Meanwhile, good people lose everything they've worked for." Elena checked her watch. Hoffman's presentation starts in 90 minutes. His victims are probably having breakfast right now, getting ready for what they think is just another day at work. Frank walked to the edge of the shooting platform and looked out over the valley. From this height, the city looked peaceful, orderly, a testament to human civilization and cooperation. But Elena knew that appearance was deceiving. Beneath the surface, predators like Hoffman prowled through corporate hierarchies, feeding on human misery while justifying their actions with economic theories and efficiency metrics. "Elena," Frank said, "if you make this shot, and that's a monumental if, what happens next?" Elena had been thinking about this question for hours. Next, Michael Hoffman realizes that someone with extraordinary capabilities is watching him. Someone who can reach him from distances he can't imagine. Someone who knows about his corruption and isn't afraid to act on that knowledge. And then he starts making mistakes. Paranoia is corrosive. It makes people careless, irrational. While he's looking over his shoulder, I release all the evidence I've gathered about his automation scheme. Financial records, email correspondence, proof that he's been systematically destroying jobs while his brother-in-law profits from the automation contracts. Frank nodded slowly. Psychological warfare combined with investigative journalism. Exactly. Elena's phone buzzed again. This time she read the message herself. It was from an unknown number. Presentation moved up to 8:30 a.m. due to scheduling conflicts. All staff report to main conference room. District office. Elena checked her watch again. 7:15 a.m. The timeline had just compressed by 30 minutes. "Change of plans," she announced, making rapid adjustments to her equipment. "Target time is now 8:30. Frank looked through the spotting scope again, studying the distant postal facility. "Elena, even if you had perfect conditions and unlimited time, this shot would be nearly impossible. Now you're working under time pressure too." Elena finished her scope adjustments and settled into her shooting position. The rifle felt like an extension of her body, perfectly balanced and responsive to her slightest movement. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate and entering the meditative state that made precision shooting possible. Through the scope, she could see tiny figures moving around the postal facility. Workers arriving for their shifts, parking in the same spots they'd used for years, walking through doors they might never pass through again as employees. "Distance, 7,600 meters, Elena said, her voice calm and focused. "Bullet drop, approximately 1,180 feet. Wind drift, estimated 340 inches at current wind speed. Flight time, 13.2 seconds. Coriolis effect, 18 inches to the right." Frank listened to her calculations with growing amazement. "How did you figure all that out? Mathematics doesn't lie. Physics doesn't have an agenda." Elena made microscopic adjustments to her scope. Unlike people. At 8:20 a.m., Elena could see movement in the postal facility's courtyard. Figures gathering for Hoffman's presentation. Workers standing in small groups while their supervisor set up a podium near the flagpole. The American flag hung motionless in the still morning air, its rope clearly visible through Elena's scope. "Target acquired," Elena said. Rope is approximately half an inch in diameter, suspended 30 feet above ground level. Clean background, with no risk of collateral damage. Frank positioned himself behind the spotting scope, watching the same scene through his own optics. Elena, I can barely make out individual people at that distance. How are you going to hit a rope? Elena's breathing slowed to an almost meditative rhythm. Her heartbeat became a steady metronome, timing the natural pause between inhalation and exhalation when her body was most stable. This was the moment she'd trained for across thousands of rounds and hundreds of competitions. The perfect alignment of skill, preparation, and absolute focus. Because, she said quietly, some things are worth doing even if they seem impossible. Through her scope, Elena could see Michael Hoffman approaching the podium. Even at this distance, his body language conveyed arrogance and self-satisfaction. He was about to destroy 47 lives, and he was proud of his efficiency. Elena placed her finger on the trigger, feeling the familiar weight and texture that had become as natural as breathing. The crosshairs aligned perfectly with the rope. Holding the flag, wind speed steady, temperature stable. All variables accounted for. Frank, she said, I need you to time this shot. When I fire, start counting. The bullet should reach the target in 13.2 seconds. Frank positioned himself where he could see both Elena and the distant target. Elena, are you absolutely sure about this? Elena thought about Maria counting pills for her sick son. About James making cookies to help his wife remember who she was. About Janet celebrating a promotion that would last exactly long enough for her to train her own replacement. About 47 families who were about to lose everything while Michael Hoffman collected bonuses for his efficiency improvements. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Elena's world narrowed to the space between her eye and the scope, between her finger and the trigger, between her intention and the target 4.7 miles away. The noise of the world faded until there was only silence, focus, and the mathematical certainty that this shot was possible. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the mountain valley like thunder, sharp and definitive. Elena maintained her position, watching through the scope as her bullet began its 13-second journey across an impossible distance. Frank counted aloud, 1.2.4. Elena could see Hoffman at the podium, beginning his presentation about modernization and efficiency. The workers stood in neat rows, listening to explanations of their own obsolescence. The flag hung peacefully from its rope, unaware that death was flying toward it at 2,800 feet per second. 8.9.10.11. Elena held her breath, her eye pressed to the scope, watching the flagpole with intensity that bordered on prayer. At this distance, she wouldn't be able to see the bullet's impact. The rope was too thin, the details too small. She would only know if she'd succeeded by watching the flag fall. 12. 13. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. The flag continued hanging from its rope. The workers continued listening to Hoffman's presentation. The world continued spinning as it always had. Then the flag fell, not cut cleanly, but severed with surgical precision, the rope parting exactly where Elena had aimed. The flag drifted down like a dying bird, settling on the courtyard concrete while 47 postal workers and one district manager stared in stunned silence. Frank lowered his stopwatch, his face pale with disbelief. Jesus Christ, Elena, you actually did it. Elena remained in position, watching through her scope as chaos erupted in the distant courtyard. Workers pointing at the fallen flag, looking around for some explanation. Hoffman backing away from the podium, his presentation forgotten as he scanned the surrounding area with growing panic. Elena could see him clearly through her scope, even at 4.7 miles. His face had gone white, his confident posture replaced by the body language of a man who just realized he was being watched by someone with impossible capabilities. "Frank," Elena said, still watching through her scope, "I need you to call Channel 7 News. Tell them that in exactly 30 minutes. They're going to receive evidence of corporate corruption that they won't be able to ignore." Frank pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "What do I tell them?" "Tell them that someone just made the longest precision shot in human history, and it was a warning." Elena began packing her equipment with the same methodical precision she'd used to make the shot. Esperanza was disassembled and returned to its case within minutes, leaving no trace of what had just occurred. As they walked back toward the parking area, Frank's phone began ringing. News outlets, military contacts, competitive shooting organizations. Word was already spreading through the precision shooting community that something unprecedented had just happened. "Elena," Frank said, "you realize you've just rewritten the record books? This shot is going to be studied and analyzed for decades." Elena loaded her equipment into her car, then paused to look back across the valley toward the postal facility. Even from this distance, she could see the activity in the courtyard, people gathering around the fallen flag, officials arriving to investigate, the normal routine of the facility completely disrupted. "Frank, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't tell anyone my name, not yet. Let them wonder who made this shot and why. Let Michael Hoffman spend the next few days looking over his shoulder, knowing that someone is watching him." Frank nodded slowly. "And the evidence you mentioned?" Elena pulled out a flash drive containing months of research, financial records, email correspondence, proof of Hoffman's systematic corruption. "This gets released to every major news outlet simultaneously, along with a statement explaining that the shot was a warning, that Michael Hoffman is being watched by someone who doesn't miss." Elena drove home through the morning traffic, passing commuters heading to jobs that would still exist at the end of the day. Her phone was buzzing constantly with messages and calls, but she ignored them all. There would be time for explanations later. Right now, she needed to complete the mission. At her apartment, Elena uploaded the evidence files to a secure server and composed the message that would accompany their release. This morning at 8:30 a.m., a precision rifle shot was made from a distance of 4.7 miles, severing the rope on a flagpole at the Central City Postal Facility. This shot represents the longest confirmed precision shot in human history. It was not made for sport or record-setting purposes. It was made as a warning to District Manager Michael Hoffman, who was systematically destroying the livelihoods of 47 postal workers while enriching himself and his associates through fraudulent automation contracts. Mr. Hoffman should understand that someone with extraordinary capabilities is watching him. Someone who knows about his corruption. Someone who doesn't miss. The attached evidence documents the full scope of his criminal conspiracy. This is his only warning. Elena scheduled the message and evidence files for simultaneous release to 15 news outlets in 30 minutes. Then she sat at her kitchen table and waited for the world to change. Her phone rang. Carmen's name on the display. "Elena, what the hell did you just do? The news is already reporting some kind of impossible sniper shot at the postal facility. Tell me that wasn't you." Elena looked at the photograph of her grandfather on the shelf, remembering his words about gifts being meant to be used. "Carmen, I need you to turn on Channel 7 News in about 20 minutes. And then I need you to promise me that you'll take care of yourself, no matter what happens next." "Elena, you're scaring me again. Don't be scared. Be proud. Your sister just did something that nobody thought was possible." Elena hung up and turned off her phone. In 20 minutes, the evidence would be released and Michael Hoffman's world would collapse. The shot had been the attention getter, the impossible demonstration of capability that would make people pay attention to the evidence. But Elena knew that the real work was just beginning. Hoffman would fight back, try to discredit the evidence, use his corporate connections to minimize the damage. The system would protect itself, as it always did, unless someone was watching. Someone who had just proven they could reach anyone, anywhere, from distances that seemed impossible. Elena opened her rifle case one more time, running her fingers along Esperanza's barrel. The weapon had just made history, but more importantly, it had served its purpose. 47 good people would keep their jobs. A corrupt official would face justice. The world would be reminded that sometimes ordinary people were capable of extraordinary things. The news broke at exactly 9:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every major network interrupted regular programming to report the same impossible story. Someone had made a precision rifle shot from 4.7 miles away, cutting down an American flag at a postal facility, while 47 employees stood witness. Sarah Martinez from Channel 7 News was the first reporter to connect the shot with the evidence dump that arrived in newsrooms across the country 30 minutes later. Her investigation had been thorough but cautious, the financial records showing Michael Hoffman's brother-in-law receiving automation contracts, the email correspondence discussing human resource optimization, the systematic timeline of job eliminations at facilities under Hoffman's management. Elena watched the coverage from her living room, volume turned low, while making coffee with hands that barely trembled. The reporters were struggling to contextualize what they were seeing. Ballistics experts explaining why the shot should have been impossible. Military advisors speculating about who might possess such capabilities. Law enforcement officials promising full investigations. But none of them understood the real story. They were focused on the spectacle of the shot itself, the breaking of records, and the demonstration of unprecedented skill. They were missing the quiet revolution that had just begun in the lives of 47 postal workers who'd arrived at work expecting to be fired and instead found themselves at the center of a national story about corporate corruption. Elena's phone had been ringing constantly since she'd turned it back on. Carmen, her mother, reporters who'd somehow obtained her number, Frank from the shooting range trying to coordinate their stories. She ignored them all except one. Maria Santos called at 10:30 a.m., her voice shaky with emotion and confusion. "Elena, are you watching the news? They're saying someone shot at our building. That there was some kind of sniper, but no one was hurt. And now there are FBI agents everywhere, asking questions about Mr. Hoffman." Elena muted the television, where a ballistics expert was explaining wind drift and bullet drop over extreme distances. "Are you okay, Maria? Is everyone safe? We're fine, but everything is crazy." The presentation was canceled. Hoffman left in some kind of police escort. And they're saying on the news that he's been stealing money or something. "Elena, what's happening?" Elena looked at the termination notices still spread across her kitchen table, evidence of a future that would now never come to pass. "I think it's happening that someone finally stood up to the people who've been hurting. U.S. But who would do something like this? Who could make a shot like that?" Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the secret she would carry for the rest of her life. Someone who cared enough to try the impossible. After Maria hung up, Elena allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The shot had worked exactly as planned, demonstrating capability while causing no harm, creating enough spectacle to draw attention to the evidence, disrupting Hoffman's presentation at precisely the moment when his victims were most vulnerable. Her laptop chimed with news alerts. The story was spreading beyond local coverage, picked up by national networks as ballistics experts weighed in on the technical impossibility of what had been accomplished. The longest confirmed sniper shot in history had just been broken by nearly 3,000 meters, under circumstances that made the achievement as much about mathematics as marksmanship. But the real news was buried in the financial documents that had accompanied the anonymous warning. Michael Hoffman's corruption ran deeper than Elena had originally discovered, a network of fraudulent contracts, kickbacks, and systematic job eliminations that had enriched him and his associates, while destroying hundreds of lives across multiple states. Elena's phone rang again. This time it was Carmen, and Elena answered. "I just watched the news," Carmen said without preamble. "Elena, tell me you didn't actually shoot at a building full of people." "I shot at a rope, Carmen, from 4.7 miles away. No people were ever in danger." "Jesus Christ, Elena, you actually did it. You made the longest sniper shot in history." Elena walked to her window, looking out at the city where her life had just changed forever. "I made a shot that needed to be made. The news is saying this is the most precise demonstration of marksmanship in human history. They're calling it impossible, unprecedented, a complete redefinition of what's achievable with precision shooting." Elena thought about her grandfather's words about gifts being meant to be used. Sometimes impossible is just another word for necessary. Carmen was quiet for a moment. "Elena, there are FBI agents all over the postal facility. They're treating this as a potential terrorist incident. What if they trace the shot back to you?" Elena had been thinking about this possibility since the moment she'd squeezed the trigger. "They'll try. But 4.7 miles is a lot of distance to search, and there are dozens of potential shooting positions in those mountains. Without witnesses, without forensic evidence at the shooting location, without any connection between me and the evidence that was released, they're looking for a needle in a haystack. What if someone at the shooting range talks? Frank knows what this was about. He won't give them anything that helps their investigation." Elena heard voices in the background on Carmen's phone, the busy sounds of a hospital in full operation. "Carmen, you need to get back to work. Your patients need you, and you can't afford to be connected to this." "Elena, what happens now?" "Hoffman is obviously finished. His corruption is exposed. Your coworkers will keep their jobs. But what about you? What's next for the woman who just made the impossible shot?" Elena looked at Esperanza's case, closed and locked, the weapon that had just rewritten history resting quietly inside. "Now I go back to being a postal worker who sorts mail on weekends and shoots targets for recreation. Nothing changes except that good people get to keep their livelihoods." But even as she said it, Elena knew that everything had changed. She was no longer the invisible woman who'd spent 8 years sorting mail in quiet desperation. She was the person who demonstrated that extraordinary precision could serve extraordinary purposes, that sometimes the only response to systematic cruelty was targeted action that made the impossible seem inevitable. By noon, the story had evolved beyond the shooting itself. Investigative reporters were diving deep into the evidence dump, finding connections between Hoffman's automation schemes and similar corruption at postal facilities nationwide. What had started as a local story about corporate greed was becoming a national scandal about systematic abuse of federal employees. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "Did you see the news? Hoffman is gone. They're saying he was stealing money and lying about the automation. We're keeping our jobs. I don't understand how this happened, but someone was watching out for us." Another text from James. "Elena, thank God you're safe. When I heard about a sniper at the facility, I was terrified something had happened to you. But now they're saying Hoffman was corrupt and the whole automation program was fraudulent. I don't know who exposed him, but they saved all our jobs." Elena smiled, typing back responses that expressed relief and confusion in equal measure. Her coworkers would never need to know that their salvation had come from 4.7 miles away, delivered by someone they'd worked alongside for 8 years. Without ever understanding what she was capable of, the afternoon brought a parade of experts, attempting to explain the technical aspects of the shot. Military snipers, competitive shooters, ballistics engineers, all of them struggling to understand how anyone could have made accurate calculations for such an extreme distance under field conditions. Elena watched with professional interest as they discussed wind patterns, atmospheric conditions, the Coriolis effect, and the mathematical complexities involved in long-range precision shooting. They were right that the shot should have been impossible. But they were missing the crucial factor that had made it achievable: absolute moral certainty that the target deserved whatever consequences might follow. At 3 p.m., Elena received a call from Frank Castellanos. "Elena, I need you to know that federal agents were here for 2 hours this morning. They wanted to know about range members, shooting records, anyone who might have the skills for extreme long-range work." Elena felt her pulse quicken slightly. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that precision shooting is a growing sport, that we have dozens of members capable of exceptional accuracy, and that the shooting community takes safety and legal compliance very seriously. I also told them that anyone with the skills to make a 4.7-mile shot wouldn't need to use our facility. They'd be operating at a level beyond anything we offer here." "Do they suspect anyone specific?" Frank's voice carried a note of admiration. "Elena, they're looking for a ghost. They have no physical evidence, no witnesses, no forensic trail. The only thing they know for certain is that someone with extraordinary capabilities made a shot that redefined what's possible with precision shooting." Elena walked to her trophy shelf, looking at the awards she'd won over years of competition. First-place finishes that had once seemed like the pinnacle of achievement now looked small and insignificant compared to what she'd accomplished that morning. "Frank, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I want you to organize a memorial shoot for my grandfather. Nothing formal. Just range members who want to honor someone who understood that skills are meant to serve purposes beyond personal satisfaction." Frank was quiet for a moment. "Elena, that's a beautiful gesture. Your grandfather would be proud of everything you've accomplished." After hanging up, Elena allowed herself to think about her grandfather for the first time since making the shot. He'd died believing that she had the potential for greatness, but he'd never lived to see her discover what that greatness might look like in practice. The shot had been for her coworkers, for Maria's sick son and James's wife and Janet's dreams of homeownership. But it had also been for a weathered old man who'd spent his Social Security money on a rifle for his granddaughter, because he believed gifts were meant to be used. Evening brought a knock at Elena's door. She looked through the peephole and saw 2 people in dark suits, federal agents. Exactly as she'd expected, Elena opened the door with an expression of mild curiosity. "Can I help you?" The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and intelligent eyes, showed her credentials. "Special Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI. This is Agent Martinez. We're investigating the incident at the postal facility where you work." Elena stepped back to let them enter her apartment. "Of course. I heard about it on the news. Is everyone okay?" Agent Torres studied Elena's living room with professional attention, taking in the shooting trophies, the modest furnishings, the general impression of a quiet life lived without drama or pretension. "Everyone is fine," Torres said. "We're trying to understand who might have the capability to make such an extraordinary shot. We understand you're an accomplished competitive shooter." Elena gestured toward her trophy shelf. "One compete in precision shooting, yes. Mostly local and regional competitions, though I've placed well at nationals a few times." Agent Martinez opened a notebook and consulted his notes. "You've won 3 state championships and placed 2nd at nationals. That suggests significant skill with long-range shooting." "I'm competent," Elena said modestly. "But what happened this morning? The news is saying someone made a shot from nearly 5 miles away. That's beyond anything attempted in competitive shooting." Torres walked to Elena's window, looking out toward the mountains where the shot had originated. "Ms. Vasquez, where were you this morning between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m.? Elena had prepared for this question. "I was here at home. I don't start work until 7 a.m., and I heard about the incident when my coworkers started calling. Can anyone verify that?" Elena shook her head. "I live alone. I was probably asleep until 6:30 or so, then getting ready for work." Martinez made notes while Torres continued studying the apartment. Ms. Vasquez, we've learned that you had a meeting with District Manager Hoffman yesterday morning. Can you tell us about that? Elena felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral. He called me in to discuss some kind of training program, new equipment, automation upgrades. He said there might be opportunities for advancement. How? Did that make you feel? Elena considered the question carefully. Hopeful, I suppose. Any opportunity for better pay or increased responsibility would be welcome. Torres turned back from the window. Were you aware of any financial irregularities in Mr. Hoffman's management practices? I sort mail, Agent Torres. I don't have access to financial information or management decisions. Until today, I had no idea there were any problems with district operations. The agent spent another 20 minutes asking questions about Elena's shooting experience, her knowledge of ballistics, her familiarity with extreme long-range techniques. Elena answered honestly but carefully, acknowledging her skills while emphasizing the impossibility of the shot that morning. After they left, Elena sat at her kitchen table feeling the weight of the investigation settling around her like a net. The agents had been professional but thorough, and she could tell they were far from satisfied with her answers. But she also knew they were searching for evidence that didn't exist. She'd been careful, methodical, leaving no forensic trail and no witnesses who could place her at the shooting location. The shot itself was so extreme that most people would dismiss it as impossible, even if someone claimed to have witnessed it. Elena's phone rang. Sarah Martinez from Channel 7 News. Ms. Vasquez, this is Sarah Martinez from Channel 7. I'm doing a follow-up story on the postal facility incident, and I understand you're an employee there as well as an accomplished competitive shooter. Would you be willing to answer a few questions? Elena considered the request. Speaking to media carried risks, but refusing might seem suspicious. I suppose so, but I don't know what I can tell you that would be useful. I'm particularly interested in the technical aspects of this morning's shot. As someone with precision shooting experience, what's your assessment of what occurred? Elena chose her words carefully. From what I understand, someone made a shot from an unprecedented distance, under conditions that should have made accurate shooting impossible. If the reports are accurate, this represents a complete redefinition of what's achievable with precision marksmanship. Could you make such a shot? Elena laughed, the sound genuine and dismissive. No one could make such a shot. The variables involved wind patterns, atmospheric conditions, target visibility are beyond human calculation at that distance. What happened this morning was either extraordinarily lucky or something else entirely. Something else? I don't know how to explain it, honestly. The mathematics shouldn't work, but clearly someone found a way to make them work. After the interview, Elena sat in her quiet apartment as darkness settled over the city. In 12 hours she'd gone from being an invisible postal worker to being the subject of a federal investigation and national media attention. But more importantly, she'd saved 47 jobs and exposed a corrupt official who'd been stealing from taxpayers while destroying working families. Elena opened her laptop and began reading the evening news coverage. Michael Hoffman had been arrested on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and corruption. The automation contracts had been suspended pending investigation. The postal workers who'd expected to be fired that morning were instead being interviewed as victims of systematic abuse by federal officials. Elena smiled, remembering the look on Hoffman's face through her rifle scope when the flag had fallen. In that moment, he'd realized that someone was watching him. Someone with capabilities he couldn't understand or defend against. That realization would haunt him for the rest of his life, even after he served whatever prison sentence awaited. Her phone buzzed with one final text of the day, from an unknown number. We know what you did. We know why you did it. And we know you won't stop watching. Thank you. Elena stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Somewhere in the city, someone understood that justice sometimes came from unexpected directions, delivered by people who appeared ordinary, until circumstances revealed their extraordinary capabilities. Elena cleaned Esperanza one final time, reassembling the rifle with the reverence due a weapon that had just made history. Tomorrow she would return to work, sorting mail alongside people who would never know that their salvation had come from 4.7 miles away, but she would know. And Michael Hoffman would know for the rest of his life that someone was watching. Someone who could reach across impossible distances with mathematical precision. Someone who didn't miss. 6 months later, Elena sorted mail with the same methodical precision she'd always used. But now her movements carried a different quality, the calm confidence of someone who discovered exactly what she was capable of. The morning sunlight streaming through the facility's windows illuminated dust motes that danced like microscopic snow, each particle following its own invisible trajectory through the air. Maria Santos worked at the adjacent station, humming softly while processing packages for the afternoon delivery route. Miguel's medical treatments were progressing better than expected, covered by the enhanced health insurance package that had come with the facility's modernization. Not the automation that Hoffman had planned, but actual improvements to working conditions and benefits. "Did you see the article in the paper this morning?" Maria asked, holding up a newspaper clipping. "They're calling it the shot that changed everything. 6 months later, and people are still trying to figure out who made it." Elena glanced at the headline without slowing her sorting rhythm. "Someone with extraordinary skills and good timing, I suppose." "The FBI closed their investigation last month," James Wilson added from across the room. He was unwrapping homemade cookies, Helen's latest recipe experiment, oatmeal chocolate chip with a hint of cinnamon. Agent Torres said they'd interviewed over 200 competitive shooters, military snipers, and ballistics experts. No one could explain how the shot was possible, let alone identify who made it. Elena accepted a cookie, tasting love and memory, and the determination of a man fighting to preserve his wife's fading identity. Maybe some questions aren't meant to be answered. Janet Kim looked up from her supervisor's desk. The promotion that had once been a cynical setup for betrayal had become genuine advancement when the corruption was exposed. "I still get chills thinking about it. Imagine having someone watching over you with those kinds of capabilities. Knowing that if someone tried to hurt you or your family, there was a guardian angel with a rifle who could reach them from miles away." Elena smiled, continuing her work while listening to her colleagues speculate about their anonymous protector. The official investigation had concluded that the shot was probably made by a highly skilled individual with military or law enforcement training, acting on information about corruption at the facility. The case remained open but inactive, filed under extraordinary circumstances requiring specialized expertise. Frank Castellanos had organized a memorial shoot for Elena's grandfather as requested, drawing precision shooters from across 3 states. They'd fired in formation at targets. Elena had selected distances that challenged their skills without approaching the impossible range she'd achieved that morning in November. Afterward, Frank had delivered a eulogy about gifts being meant to serve purposes beyond personal glory. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Coffee after your shift? I have news about the scholarship program." The scholarship program had been Carmen's idea, using the media attention from the shooting to raise funds for postal workers, children pursuing higher education. Elena had made anonymous donations large enough to fund the first 3 recipients, money saved from years of modest living and wise investments. "Good news?" Elena replied, "Great news. We've raised enough to expand statewide." Elena looked around. The mail facility that had once been scheduled for automation. The same machines hummed with mechanical efficiency, but now they were operated by workers who knew their jobs were secure, their benefits protected, their dignity recognized. The transformation hadn't been achieved through legislation or union negotiations. It had been accomplished with one perfectly placed bullet, traveling 4.7 miles in 13.2 seconds. At lunch, Elena drove to the shooting range where everything had changed. Frank met her at the gate, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd been keeping a secret for 6 months. "Elena," he said, "we need to talk." They walked to the high elevation platform where Elena had made her impossible. Shot. The valley spread below them, peaceful and green in the autumn sunshine. The postal facility was barely visible in the distance, a small rectangle among thousands of other buildings that made up the fabric of ordinary life. "I got a call yesterday," Frank said, "from the military. They want to know if I've trained anyone capable of extreme long-range precision work. Apparently, they're developing new programs for specialist recruitment." Elena sipped her coffee, tasting the bitter earthiness that had fueled her early morning preparations 6 months ago. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that the best shooters are usually the ones you'd never suspect. People who appear ordinary until circumstances reveal their extraordinary capabilities." Frank studied Elena's profile. "I also told them that anyone with the skills to make that shot wouldn't need military training. They'd be operating at a level beyond anything institutional programs could develop." Elena nodded, watching a hawk circle high above the valley. The bird rode invisible air currents with perfect precision, adjusting its flight path to factors that remained mysterious to ground-bound observers. "Frank, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd missed?" Frank was quiet for a moment. "No, Elena, because I've watched you shoot for 3 years, and I've never seen you miss when it mattered." Elena thought about the mathematics of that morning bullet drop: wind drift, the Coriolis effect, atmospheric pressure variations. All variables that could have shifted in the 13.2 seconds between trigger squeeze and target impact. Any one of them could have thrown her shot off by yards, turning her precision demonstration into a harmless miss that would have changed nothing, but she hadn't missed. The bullet had traveled 4.7 miles through shifting air and arrived exactly where she'd intended, severing a half-inch rope with surgical precision while 47 people watched their oppressor realize that someone was watching him. "Elena," Frank said, "there's something else. I've been contacted by people from other places. Other situations where good people are being hurt by corrupt officials who think they're untouchable." Elena felt something stir in her chest, not excitement, exactly, but recognition. The feeling of purpose that had guided her through that November morning, the certainty that her skills could serve something larger than personal satisfaction. What kind of situations? A defense contractor in Nevada who's been selling defective equipment to the military while executives profit from cost overruns. A pharmaceutical company in Ohio that's been diluting medications for children's hospitals. A municipal water authority in Texas that's been falsifying safety reports while collecting bonuses for efficiency improvements. Elena listened to the litany of corruption, feeling the weight of capability settling on her shoulders like a familiar burden. Each situation represented families destroyed by systematic greed, communities betrayed by people who'd confused authority with permission to cause harm. "Frank, are you asking me to become some kind of vigilante?" "I'm telling you that there are people who believe you've demonstrated that accountability can come from unexpected directions. People who think that sometimes the only response to systematic corruption is targeted precision that makes the impossible seem inevitable." Elena walked to the edge of the platform, looking out over the valley where her bullet had traveled 6 months ago. The distance still seemed impossible, even knowing she'd bridged it successfully. But impossible was just another word for necessary, especially when good people were suffering while bad people profited from their pain. "If I were to consider such things," Elena said carefully, "I'd need better intelligence, more sophisticated equipment, and support systems that couldn't be traced back to me." Frank smiled grimly. The people who contacted me mentioned that resources would be available for someone with your particular combination of skills and moral clarity. Elena thought about her coworkers, safe now in jobs that provided dignity and security. She thought about Maria's son getting proper medical care, James's wife receiving treatment in comfortable facilities, Janet supervising operations that valued human contribution. She thought about 47 families who'd gone to sleep secure in their futures because someone had been willing to attempt the impossible. Tell these people that I'll consider their requests. But they need to understand that I don't work for anyone. I work for what's right. They understand. They're not looking for an employee, Elena. They're looking for a guardian angel with a rifle. 2 years later, the newspaper headline read, "Mysterious Sniper Strikes Again. Corrupt defense contractors' equipment demonstration disrupted by impossible shot." Below it, a smaller story reported the arrest of executives who'd been selling defective armor to military personnel while pocketing millions in cost overruns. Elena read the coverage while sorting mail at the facility that had become the first victory in her unlikely campaign against systematic corruption. The defense contractor case had required a 3.8-mile shot through desert conditions, severing a cable on a weapons demonstration platform while generals and politicians watched their criminal conspiracy collapse in real time. The pharmaceutical executives had been easier, a 2.1-mile shot that had punctured a ceremonial champagne bottle during their victory celebration for FDA approval of diluted medications. The water authority officials had required more creativity, a 4.2-mile shot that had triggered a fire sprinkler system in their executive conference room. While they were falsifying safety reports, each shot had been accompanied by anonymous evidence, dumps that exposed the full scope of the corruption being targeted. Each had resulted in arrests, investigations, and institutional changes that protected the vulnerable people who'd been exploited by systematic greed. Elena had become a ghost story, a legend whispered about in corporate boardrooms and government offices. The angel of accountability, some called her. The impossible shot, others said. But the people who'd been saved by her interventions had simpler names: justice, protection, hope. Maria approached Elena's workstation carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. "This came for you," she said. "No return address, but it feels like books." Elena accepted the package, recognizing the weight and shape immediately. Inside, she found 2 items: a custom ballistics calculator capable of computing trajectories for distances up to 10 miles, and a photograph of a young girl in a hospital bed, smiling despite the 4 tubes and monitoring equipment surrounding her. The note attached was brief: Sarah Mitchell, age 7, rare genetic condition. Hospital in Denver cutting her treatment program due to insurance disputes with pharmaceutical company that's been inflating medication prices. Company executives will be attending charity gala next month at Colorado Convention Center, 6.2 miles from Mountain Ridge, north of city. Weather forecast looks perfect. Sarah believes in guardian angels. Elena studied the photograph for a long moment, seeing her own determination reflected in a 7-year-old's eyes. She thought about the mathematics involved in a 6.2-mile shot, the precision required to send a message across that impossible distance, the certainty needed to attempt something beyond the boundaries of human achievement. Then she thought about Maria's son Miguel, healthy now and thriving in school because someone had been willing to try the impossible. She thought about her grandfather's voice: "Gifts are meant to be used, Mia." Elena folded the note and photograph, placing them in her jacket pocket next to the new ballistics calculator. That evening, she would begin planning another impossible shot, calculating trajectories that would bridge the distance between corruption and accountability. 5 years later, the documentary aired on the anniversary of the first shot, a comprehensive investigation into what media had termed the guardian angel phenomenon. Over 5 years, 17 impossible precision shots had disrupted corporate corruption, government abuse, and systematic exploitation of vulnerable populations. Each shot had been accompanied by evidence that led to arrests, investigations, and institutional reforms. Elena watched from her living room, now decorated with commendations from grateful communities, anonymous thank you letters from families whose lives had been saved, and newspaper clippings documenting the impact of precision, justice delivered from impossible distances. The documentary featured interviews with law enforcement officials, ballistics experts, and terrorism specialists, all struggling to explain how one person could consistently make shots that defied mathematical possibility. They had theories but no evidence, suspicions but no proof, admiration tinged with frustration at their inability to identify or apprehend their target. "We're dealing with someone who has redefined what's achievable with precision shooting," Agent Torres said in her interview. "Each shot represents mathematical calculations so complex that they require understanding of physics at a level beyond most university programs. But more than that, they require moral certainty that justifies attempting the impossible." Elena smiled, remembering her first conversation with Torres in this same apartment 5 years ago. The agent had been looking for a terrorist, a rogue sniper, someone whose skills posed a threat to public safety. She'd never considered that the most precise shooter in history might be motivated by justice rather than violence, by protection rather than destruction. Carmen appeared on screen, interviewed as a healthcare professional who'd witnessed the impact of the pharmaceutical company case. "Someone is watching out for people who can't protect themselves," she said. "When institutional systems fail, when corruption seems untouchable, there's still accountability. That gives people hope." The documentary concluded with speculation about the guardian angel's identity and future activities. Experts suggested that the shooter was probably military trained, possibly law enforcement, definitely someone with access to specialized equipment and extensive ballistics knowledge. None of them guessed that she was a postal worker who sorted mail during the week and practiced precision shooting on weekends. Elena's phone rang as the credits rolled. An unknown number, but she'd been expecting the call. Ms. Vasquez, the voice, was young, female, speaking with quiet intensity. "My name is Rachel Chun. I'm a graduate student in applied mathematics at MIT. I've been studying your work." Elena felt her pulse quicken slightly. "I'm sorry?" "The ballistics calculations for your shots. I've reverse-engineered them from the evidence available in news reports. The mathematics are extraordinary. You've consistently solved computational problems that should require supercomputer modeling." Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her options. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "I don't think so. I also think you need help with something bigger than individual cases of corruption." "What do you mean?" Rachel's voice carried the excitement of someone who discovered something unprecedented. "I mean, there's a systematic problem with democratic institutions failing to hold powerful people accountable. Individual precision strikes are effective for specific cases, but what if we could create broader change?" Elena walked to her window, looking out at the city where her impossible shots had repeatedly bridged the distance between injustice and accountability. What kind of broader change? What if every corrupt official, every exploitative executive, every person who profits from human suffering knew that someone was watching? What if they understood that accountability could come from any distance, at any time, with mathematical precision? Elena thought about the 17 successful shots, the lives saved, the institutions reformed, the vulnerable people protected by demonstrations of impossible precision. But Rachel was right. It was reactive justice, one case at a time, limited by her ability to identify targets and calculate solutions. "What are you proposing?" "A network. Other precision shooters, trained to your standards, equipped with the technology to make impossible shots, coordinated to create systematic accountability for systematic corruption." Elena felt something shift in her understanding of what she'd begun 5 years ago with a single shot at a flagpole 4.7 miles away. The precision strikes have been individual demonstrations of capability, personal responses to specific injustices. But they'd also been proof of concept, evidence that accountability could transcend traditional boundaries if delivered with sufficient skill and moral certainty. Rachel, are you talking about creating an organization of snipers? I'm talking about creating an organization of guardians. People who understand that sometimes justice requires impossible precision delivered from distances that seem supernatural. Elena looked at Esperanza's case, closed and waiting for the next impossible shot. The rifle had become more than a weapon. It was a symbol of the idea that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when circumstances demanded extraordinary responses. If I were interested in such a proposal, Elena said carefully, what would you need from me? Your methods, your calculations, your understanding of how precision can serve justice. Rachel paused. And your commitment to training others who share your moral clarity. Elena thought about her grandfather's words, about gifts being meant to be used. She thought about Maria's son, healthy and thriving. About James's wife, receiving care in comfortable facilities. About 47 postal workers who'd kept their jobs because someone had been willing to attempt the impossible. But mostly, she thought about a 7-year-old girl named Sarah Mitchell, alive and healthy because someone had made a 6.2-mile shot that had seemed impossible until it was accomplished with mathematical precision. Rachel, Elena said, I think we should meet. Keep this section. It's the proper conclusion. The memorial service was held at the shooting range where everything had begun. 50 precision shooters gathered to honor Elena Vasquez on the 10th anniversary of the first impossible shot. Frank Castellanos, now retired, delivered the reflection while Carmen stood beside Elena, both women graying at the temples but steady in their purpose. Elena taught us that gifts are meant to serve something larger than personal satisfaction, Frank said. She showed us that precision can be a form of prayer, that accuracy can serve justice, and that sometimes the impossible is just another word for necessary. Elena looked out over the assembly men and women she'd trained over the past decade. Representatives of the Guardian Angel Network that now operated across 17 countries. Each had demonstrated the moral clarity and technical skill required to make impossible shots in service of protecting the vulnerable from systematic exploitation. The network had evolved beyond individual precision strikes into comprehensive intelligence gathering, evidence analysis, and coordinated accountability operations. Corporate corruption, government abuse, exploitation of vulnerable populations, all now subject to oversight by people who could deliver consequences from distances that seemed supernatural. Elena's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Pharmaceutical. Executives in Switzerland inflating AIDS medication prices in Africa. Children dying for profit margins. Mountain Ridge 8.3 miles from executive retreat. Weather perfect for next 3 days. Guardian Angel 7 is in position and requests permission to proceed. Elena typed back, approved. Remember, precision serves justice, not revenge. Document everything. Protect the innocent. She looked at the response that appeared moments later. Understood. The impossible shot serves the necessary purpose. Guardian Angel 7 out. Carmen squeezed Elena's arm. 10 years, and you're still making impossible things seem inevitable. Elena smiled, watching the precision shooters practice at targets that would challenge their skills, without approaching the extreme distances she'd pioneered. I'm still just sorting mail and shooting targets on weekends. Elena, you've created something unprecedented. A form of accountability that transcends traditional boundaries. Justice delivered with mathematical precision from distances that redefine what's possible. Elena thought about the statistics she'd memorized. 847 successful precision strikes across 10 years. 2,340 corrupt officials arrested. Institutional reforms that protected millions of vulnerable people. Systematic changes that had redefined how power was exercised in democratic societies. But the numbers that mattered most were smaller, more personal. 47 postal workers who'd kept their jobs. One 7-year-old girl who'd received treatment for her rare genetic condition. Thousands of families who'd been protected from exploitation by the knowledge that someone was watching with impossible capabilities. Carmen, do you remember when we were kids and you used to dare me to climb higher in that old oak tree? You always went higher than I expected. Mom said you were going to fall and break your neck. But I never fell. Carmen looked out over the valley where Elena's first impossible shot had traveled 4.7 miles to change everything. No, you never fell. You just kept climbing until you could see things that nobody else could see. Elena's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Guardian Angel 12, positioned in the mountains outside Denver. Corporate executives inflating insulin prices while diabetic children die. Target acquired at 7.1 miles. Awaiting your authorization. Elena looked at her reflection in her phone screen. The same ordinary face that had once sorted mail in quiet desperation, now commanding a network of precision guardians who protected the vulnerable from systematic exploitation. Her transformation had begun with a single impossible shot, but it had evolved into something that redefined accountability itself. Carmen, she said, I need to authorize another impossible shot. Carmen nodded, understanding the weight that came with each decision. Someone else who thinks they're untouchable. Someone else who's about to learn that distance is no protection from precision justice. Elena typed her response. Guardian Angel 12, you are authorized to proceed. Remember, we protect the innocent by holding the guilty accountable. Make your shot count. The response came immediately. Understood, Guardian Angel Prime. The impossible shot serves the necessary purpose. Elena smiled at the designation her network had given her, Guardian Angel Prime, the woman who'd proven that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when armed with moral certainty and mathematical precision. She'd gone from sorting mail to coordinating justice delivered from distances that seemed supernatural, all because she'd refused to accept that good people should suffer while bad people prospered. Elena Vasquez stood at her kitchen window, looking out at a world that had been quietly transformed by 15 years of impossible shots and precision justice. At 59, she'd officially retired from postal work, but her real job overseeing the Guardian Angel network continued with the same methodical precision she'd once used to sort mail. The network now included 127 trained precision shooters across 32 countries, each capable of making shots that redefined the boundaries of human achievement. Corporate corruption, government abuse, exploitation of vulnerable populations, all now subject to oversight by people who could deliver consequences from distances that seemed impossible until they were accomplished with mathematical certainty. Elena picked up the photograph of her grandfather, the man who'd believed in her potential before she'd understood it herself. Mia, she whispered to his weathered face, gifts are meant to be used. And sometimes impossible is just another word for necessary. Her phone displayed the day's statistics. 3 corrupt officials arrested after impossible precision demonstrations. 2 pharmaceutical companies forced to reduce medication prices. 1 defense contractor canceling fraudulent contracts. Thousands of vulnerable people protected by the knowledge that someone was watching with capabilities that transcended traditional boundaries. Elena smiled, remembering the morning 15 years ago when she'd driven to a shooting range in the pre-dawn darkness, carrying a rifle and an impossible dream of justice delivered with mathematical precision. That morning, she'd been a postal worker planning to attempt a shot that should have been impossible. By evening, she'd become something unprecedented proof that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when circumstances demanded. Extraordinary responses. The woman, who'd once sorted mail in quiet desperation, had discovered that precision could serve purposes beyond personal satisfaction, that accuracy could deliver justice, and that sometimes the only response to systematic cruelty was targeted action that made the impossible seem inevitable. Elena opened her laptop and began typing her final report. 15 years ago, I made a shot that traveled 4.7 miles to change everything. Today, the Guardian Angel Network continues that mission, protecting the vulnerable through precision justice delivered from distances that redefine what's possible. We are the Watchers, the Guardians, the proof that accountability can come from any direction when delivered with sufficient skill and moral certainty. She paused, looking at Esperanza's case one final time. The rifle that had rewritten history now rested quietly, its purpose fulfilled, its legacy measured not in records broken, but in lives saved. Elena typed her final words. Remember, gifts are meant to be used. Distance is no protection from precision justice. And sometimes, when all else fails, someone is watching who never misses. She closed the laptop and walked outside, where Carmen waited with coffee and the morning newspaper. The headline read, Guardian Angel Network celebrates 15 years of precision justice. Below it, testimonials from grateful families reformed. Institutions and communities that had been protected by impossible shots delivered with mathematical certainty. Elena, Carmen said, you've created something that will outlast us both. Elena smiled, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and promise. Somewhere among those peaks, Guardian Angel 23 was probably calculating wind patterns and bullet trajectories, preparing to deliver justice to someone who thought distance made them untouchable. No, Carmen. I just proved that sometimes ordinary people can do extraordinary things. The network they built from that proof, that's what will outlast us. Elena sipped her coffee and opened the newspaper, reading about the world she'd helped create through 15 years of impossible precision. A world where systematic corruption faced systematic accountability, where vulnerable people were protected by guardians with supernatural capabilities, where justice could be delivered from any distance with mathematical certainty. Thank you for your time watching this story. Please subscribe to our channel and share with others who appreciate precision storytelling. Elena Vasquez had started as a postal worker who sorted mail and shot targets on weekends. She'd become the Guardian Angel Prime, the woman who'd shown the world that precision could serve justice, that accuracy could protect the innocent, and that sometimes the impossible was just another word for necessary. Subscribe to my channel, where silence is never forgotten.